you kind of need to go through some like darkness, I think, a little bit, so you can understand what you're dealing with, and there's danger there.
Hey, Jon, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Well, finally, it's good to meet up, and it's great to be on your podcast.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've had a lot going on, a lot of production stuff you've been doing, a lot of travel, and so I'm grateful we can make it happen.
Right.
So I think of all the different kind of artists and creatives that I can think of, I think the one that has the most obscure rise is probably the film director. I don't think that I have a good sense. Like, I know what it is to be a band and to grow as a band and do the touring circuits. I worked in music studios and painters and artists, but how a director goes from starting out making films as a young man to doing big budget features, documentaries, things like that. I think that's the sort of thing that I have no idea how that works. And so maybe you could tell a little bit of your story of how you came up through the film world and how that ties into some of the other creative projects that you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I'm not really I don't really consider myself as like a successful filmmaker, like an established filmmaker. It's not. It's not something to do if you're looking for a stable income. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So of course, if you're in Hollywood and you make it there, it's great money and all that stuff, right? But it really is it's a passion that you have, and it's something you pursue because you're obsessed with it, right? And that's my story, and I think with with the majority of people in this field that you talk to will have a similar, a similar reason why they went all in. So for me, yeah, I mean, I've always been somebody who was creative. Like as a kid, I would draw comic strips, right? I would draw my own comic strips. I would draw Garfield, I would draw my own Garfield stories and stuff, and also like my own original stories. Mostly, and which is kind of like making a movie, right? You're basically telling a story with images, right? And so when I got older, so as a kid, I grew up in Europe. I was born in South Africa. I grew up in Belgium. When I was 14, my family moved to Canada, right? So when I came to Canada, there was more opportunity there to get involved in something like the film industry. But even that, at first it's like, you have this sort of desire to be involved with something like that and to pursue something like that. But, in the front of your mind, you're like, it's a pipe dream, right? Like,
sure.
Most people are not successful, which is true. I mean, it's a hard reality. Most people are not successful in that kind of endeavor. So, but you sort of... You basically tell yourself like it's not possible. You're going to do something that's more accepted, that seems more stable. So I went to university. After I took like a year off from school, basically after I graduated high school, and I spent a year in university. This is the U of T in Toronto, and in Scarborough actually. It's like a secondary campus, and I just realized there like this is not worth it. Like yeah. I'm gonna waste my life. I don't care if I make good money or not. I'm just gonna be wasting my life. And I have skills and talents that I want to explore and develop and bring to the world, right? And I'm just gonna squander my life here. Like you just have one life, right? Like you don't want to squander it. So and it really became it was a very clear moment for me when I was sitting in a philosophy class. And there's like 400 students in the class, and I'm way at the top. And I can see my instructor all the way down there. He's like this small.
Oh right? Wow, yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even know what this guy looks like, and I'm supposed to be learning from him, right?
About philosophy too.
Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, it just at that point it became clear to me like I'm sitting here with like 400 other students. We're all going to be competing for the same jobs that we probably don't even want to do, but we have to because society expects this of us, and we have to make a living and all this stuff, right? So I'm like, I'm not doing this. Yeah, screw it. So at some point, I came home. I don't know if it was that day or not, but I just told my parents, like, you know what, I'm not going back. I'm not going back to university, and I'm going to be making movies, right? So, but in my mind, I was like, no school whatsoever. I'm just going to make movies and just make it happen. To my surprise, they were fine with that. They just had one condition: is I had to go to film school, right? So I'm like, sure, that's fine. Yeah, it's not a bad trade-off, and and back then, so this is 2005, right? Mm-hmm. So my last year in university was 2000. Well, my first and only year was like 2004, 05, I think. And it was 2005. And so I think that's the year that YouTube got started. Mm-hmm. So it was still in its infancy, right? So if you wanted to go into the film industry, you kind of had to go to film school at that stage. Yeah. Like now I tell people, you want to become a filmmaker, don't go to film school. You're going to waste your money. It's overpriced. And the skills you'll learn there are important, but you can learn them on your own using YouTube and these platforms. And the most important skill to be successful, and it's something I've always had, it doesn't come naturally to me, is your people skills, like how you present yourself, how you make friends. Yep. If you're a temperamental artist, it can be a challenge. But you have to have people skills. You have to have networking skills, and that's stuff you don't learn in film school, like in a class. Mm-mm. But you do sort of learn it because you have to work with people around you, right? And I noticed then, like, and this was one of those like, it was one of those like, it's like a fast track film school type thing where you're there for like just over a year, and then that's it. So you pay them a lot of money. I mean, it was right. You pay them a lot of money, and they just sort of like run you through the meat grinder kind of thing. But I noticed there too, like, it was kind of a scam in a way, but there's a lot of opportunity there still. Like, no matter what situation you find yourself in, there's always some kind of opportunity there. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to give her, as much as I can. And
the Canadian comes out, going to give her.
I'm going to give her, man. Yeah. So, I learned a lot there. I met some good people there. But then, again, like my worldview, I'm a lifelong Christian, and I'm also conservative. I'm lifelong conservative, basically. Mm-hmm. Like when at my first political awakening, I'm like, this is the one. This is the side of things that makes sense to me. Yeah. And of course, that's been influenced by my. It's been influenced by by me, by virtue of me being a Christian as well. But anyway, so I was right away at odds with people around me, because in film school in Toronto, like they're going to be liberals, man. It's just default state. That's just how it is, right? Yeah. Yep. So. There was always this sort of like disconnect between me and the people around me. And, I don't want to say they're bad people. They're not bad people. They're, they want to get ahead. They want to be successful. Sure. But, they're going to look at you a little bit sideways, when you make a short film about how 9/11 was probably an inside job. Maybe. Right? Maybe. And these people, I did this in 2012. I a short film about 9/11 being an inside job. And, wow. And some of these people, they made the film with me, and it's to their credit. I guess I didn't realize back then how controversial it was. I mean, 2012, you probably should have, but
by that point, it's obvious by that point.
Right. But I submitted it to festivals and things like that, and it got blackballed and whatever. And like a year later, it got put on InfoWars, right? So now these people are probably like, oh my God, like I helped John make this film, and it's on InfoWars with Alex Jones. I didn't care. I was happy with it. But, sure. I stuck around for another like 3 years in Toronto, and it just got to the point where it's like, you know what? I'm not going to make it here. Like, I'm a complete fish out of water. These people, I could see from back then already, like, the way that society, it started to get really divided. And I could see it was just going to get worse from that point. Like, this 2015, I saw that it was just going to get worse, and there's just no way I'm going to make it here. Right? Like, I'm not going to make it with these people unless I shut myself up, I self-censor, I play the game.
Right.
And some people do that, and there's some merit to that, but it can't last forever. Like, you need to be who you are. If you're an artist, you want to express yourself, and if you're constantly, if you're tamping down on that, it's not good. It's not good for the soul, right? And I think you sort of learn to be a coward that way. So it's something to think about if you're in that position. Right? Like, at some point, you have to reveal who you are, right? If you want to play that game. So anyway,
especially if you're an artist.
Yeah. Right. So my wife and I at that point have been talking. Like, we want to move out west somehow. It just felt right for, it was like a lot of our major decisions, we just kind of go on gut feeling, and we wanted to go out west. And so at the time, my brother was in the RCMP, right? It's like the federal police force in Canada, but they do local policing as well if there's no police force there.
The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And he was stationed in Alberta, and after like so many years, it's policy sort of that you have to get transferred to a different town or province or whatever. And so he got posted to BC, which is it's the westernmost province in Canada, right? And we're like, okay, fine, let's go.
Going out west.
This is like out west, and we drove there. Like, it's crazy.
That's a long drive from Alberta.
From Toronto.
Oh,
we drove from Toronto. Yeah, so it's like a 3-4 day drive. Like
New York to Seattle in America.
Yeah, it's pretty much that. Yeah. So so we did that, and we arrived in this tiny town in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of BC, right? And so you arrive there, people see you're new, and they're like, "Oh, so what do you do?" "Oh, I'm a filmmaker." "What are you doing here?" Right? Yeah, good question. So it was kind of like, okay, now what, right? But long story short, 2015 is when the U.S. election started to heat up more, and Donald Trump became this phenomenon. So at that point, I really started using Twitter a lot, to see what was going on, and that was that's the first place where you get news. And I started seeing this one account, this one account. They sort of kept popping up on my feed that people started retweeting, and it's Mike Cernovich. And I started reading stuff. I'm like, okay. And back then, he was a lot like saltier and more controversial than he is now.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I found that he just understood on like an instinctive level what was going on, and so I followed him. And yeah, anyway, at some point, his DMs. His DMs were open, and it was like, I don't know, it was like March 2016 or something like that. And I just figured, I'll send him a DM. I'm like, I just really appreciate what you're doing and what you're saying, and I feel like we're going to work together someday. I don't know if he ever read the message or not. I mean, to this day, I don't know if he actually read that message. But a few months later, he posted on Twitter that he wants to make a documentary on fake news, and if he wants to find a director, so you have to submit like a trailer that you make for the movie. So I did that, and that's how I basically got the gig, right? So he chose me, and he also chose Scooter Downey, who I knew who he was because in 2013 there was a short film contest that was run by InfoWars and Alex Jones. I placed second, Scooter placed third, right?
Okay.
And so I knew who he was. He knew who I was. So it's like, oh, this is interesting. It's some sort of like a synchronicity thing happening here. And we ended up working really well together to this day, solid friends. So it was a really good experience, and that's basically that launched me into this whole like, this like online right wing, whatever conservative, whatever you want to call it, sphere.
Yeah.
That was that at that time was full of energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of launched me, right? And the rest is pretty much history, as they say. So.
That's pretty incredible that a lot of things really lined up, to make it all possible and to make you the right man in the right place at the right time. And I didn't realize that you and Scooter hadn't been filmmaking partners before. It must have been quite an experience to show up on this project, this really high profile project with some huge names like Tim Pool and Jordan Peterson and have to make it work in real time. Like, what was that? I mean, you guys knew of each other because you were both in this InfoWars, short film competition. Like, what was that like in those early stages? Like, you meet in person, you start talking, and you start coming up with a creative vision. What was that process as you're learning to build a friendship and a working relationship kind of in real time?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's, if you really think about it, it was kind of miraculous because in filmmaking and, like any sort of, kind of creative endeavor, there's a lot of ego at play.
Yeah.
And, it sounds bad and many times it is bad, but it kind of has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be, because if you don't have that, you will just get run over constantly,
mm-hmm.
right? So if you want to make your mark, you kind of have to have that in place. So when I first flew to LA, I'm like, okay, how is this going to work out? Me working with this guy. Like, at that point, we had talked on Skype a little bit and stuff, and it seemed okay. There's, at first you're always a little bit kind of standoffish, but at the same time you realize, like, this is not my project.
Mm-hmm.
This is Mike Cernovich's project, and his name is attached to this.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're gonna go and fight and be dicks and have like ego, and have like ego contests, it's gonna negatively
Impact. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a little bit of a stutter.
Oh, okay.
And it sometimes just like, it just rears its head. Right?
Sure.
But anyway, it's going to negatively impact him, and that is not going to be good for him. It's not going to be good for me. Not for Scooter. It's going to just screw everything up, right? And at that point too, like you feel like a kind of responsibility of like, this is, we're on the right wing, we're conservatives, whatever, and we've been really underrepresented in media and in film, music, what have you.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of energy behind this movement because of Trump. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't want to screw it up. Like you feel like there's a responsibility to do right by all these people who want to see you succeed, right? So that kind of shaped how we work together. But then, at some point we realized, like, okay, this guy's actually really good at what he does. I can actually trust him. I don't have
each other, you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. He thought that about me. I thought that about him. To this day, we're like, there's only one person I really trust with something I'm working on, and that's him. And he feels that way about me too.
That's amazing.
So it was a combination of like, yes, we have to, like I said, we have to work together with our ego. So I'll put it that way. And it's also just, it was just divine providence at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you learn to flow with that.
Yeah, because you recognize it's not all about you, right? Like, you've been brought on board to do a job, and this is your coworker, and you respect each other going in, and you got to make it work. And I definitely know that success at any creative endeavor at a high level absolutely requires ego. Absolutely requires ego. Like, it's sort of, there's the legendary rock star ego, the legendary Hollywood actor, director, or whatever. Someone who's performing at that level has must have such an immense trust in themselves, and has been given bad advice through their whole career, decades, let's say, and they've not listened to it, and they followed their own intuition and guidance and gotten the job done better than anyone else. And so that's kind of where that healthy ego kind of comes from. Now, it can get completely out of control once you start, I guess, idolizing yourself, which men are apt to do. But if you've got that healthy ego in check, then you recognize, like you did, no, we're here to do a job for Mike Cernovich and for this larger right-wing kind of movement that's really having a moment, that's reflecting your own personal values and your own upbringing. Like, you're not leading, you're serving. there is a leadership component in terms of the creative production, but you're serving this larger movement. That's healthy ego, right?
Right. No, absolutely true. Absolutely true. And like, yeah, it's a balance, right? It's like anything. There's a balance for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so you get on, you start putting together this project. And, these are a lot of really high flying people at the time. Some of them still are. And you sort of went from just DMing Mike Cernovich, like, hey, I'm a big fan of what you do, to, hey, why don't you sit down with Jordan Peterson and Project Veritas and all stuff. What was that experience like? Just, kind of building the plane in midair, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of it was kind of a whirlwind,
sure,
in a way, but it was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was nice to meet all these people. I've never really been somebody who gets starstruck.
Sure,
right. So, because you just sort of realize, like, these people are just people, man. They're humans. They've got their quirks, and
yeah.
They've got their insecurities, even, and whatever, and they don't want to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
Some people maybe are a little bit more like self-destructive and things like that, whatever. But they if they agree to be in your film, they have there's a lot of implicit trust that they place in you.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's not just me and Scooter; it's Mike Cernovich, right? But they're not there to make your life difficult. They want to sing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it still is like a collaboration, and you kind of have to see it that way, and you have to help them be the best and look the best,
yeah,
so that they can do what they do best, right?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess I get the whirlwind kind of part, like almost like overnight you're transported into the highest levels of the movement that's beginning to take shape at the time. Like that alone, regardless of, yeah, they're absolutely all human beings. When I lived in San Francisco, I was in the music industry, and not at a super high level, but I got to travel in some of those circles, and it's the same kind of thing. Like people want to look good, they want to do well, they don't want to mess up. That's a good distinction, by the way. It's not just that they want to do well; it's that they don't want to mess up, and that's a very different kind of energy. But just to discover that these men and women that that would be very easy to idolize, it's like, no, they're just people. They come off the stage, and there's an energy that they embody. But then when you hang out and talk with them, it's like, oh yeah, they're just a human being. They're not levitating 3 inches off the ground. But there still is a feeling of getting into spaces where little things matter. I think we're used to operating with a wide tolerance in our everyday kind of casual social lives and in some workplaces, but at levels like that where people don't want to mess up, the tolerances
have a lot of pressure on them.
Sorry?
They have a lot of pressure on them.
Yes. And I think that's something that's very difficult for an average person to understand is the number of people that are the stage that they're operating on, the precision of words. Like Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this in particular. He likes to be very precise in his speech because he's going to get called out on every single word he uses. So he wants to make sure that the words that he uses are the words that he chooses. And most people don't have to live that way. We're fortunate to not live that way.
Absolutely true. And I think, I knew that was true, from a long time ago, because my dad was a pastor.
Oh, okay.
Right. So, you see a lot. I sort of did like a little tweet about this on Twitter last night, but you sort of understand how the scenes and behind the scenes work. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like this bad thing all behind the scenes, it's nefarious. No, it's just like, how these things that you see on a Sunday morning, how it runs during the week, how it runs behind the scenes. Like, there's an organization that needs to take place because, if you don't have that, you don't have the Sunday morning service, right?
Right.
But with that comes, a lot of politics and things like that, and people, people want to take it down. Like, if you're the pastor, there's going to be people who come to your church and they're going to want to take you down, right?
It's so terrible. I know you're right, but it's terrible.
Yeah, it's human nature,
yeah.
Right? So I knew from very early on, like, what those pressures look like.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the public eye, it doesn't matter if you have like a small church of 100 people, you're still in like you you have to meet certain expectations, I guess. I don't, you know, and yeah, you know, there's more pressure on you than most people have, like their 9 to 5 or whatever, right? And so so I knew that as well, and I also knew like if people see that you are close to somebody like that, they want to use you to get to them, right? So I was already very aware of that. So when that started happening with Mike Cernovich, I mean, I would get DMs from people. Can you ask this? Or, you know, what do you like? I just don't answer that stuff. And you know, if it's with somebody that I'm talking to and they start asking questions, I make sure that I'm going to protect these people, right? And it's not because I know things that are bad to know. It's just like you know, like you just want to weed out these people basically, because they will draw energy away from them and you as well, because now you're involved.
Yeah.
So I sort of understand, like, yeah, you know, there's a lot of pressure on these people, and they have needs that are way different from like the average person. And if you understand that, then, you know, you will, you know, get far, you will gain trust and things like that. So, and it's just better for everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a different way of living and than people are used to, and it's not necessarily intuitive. Like, it's a little bit like riding a bike. Like one of the reasons I'm interested in your story is because I can relate in some ways of having all these different experiences that have all fed into what I'm doing now in ways that I didn't necessarily plan. So I want to get to talking about Electrum Fire and your new music project and how you're putting together your music and, you know, cinematography and editing. We'll get to all that. And then of course the political and religious component, like it's all going somewhere, but definitely I can look back and see, you know, during my time that, you know, in the music industry, working in a music studio, you know, seeing like, wow, learning how to interact in this environment. Like there's no, like you started out by saying, people skills, networking. Like you can't learn networking in a classroom, right? What are you going to do? Like put it up on the whiteboard? Like, no, and especially when you're networking with high powered, professional, successful, established public people, there's no class for that. Like you just gotta pad up and learn to do it. And those skills will take you further in some ways. Yes, of course, you have to have the creative skills locked down, but if the creative skills without the networking skills, without the knowledge of how to actually be in a room full of successful people, you won't get anywhere. Similarly, you can know how to be in a room full of successful people and not actually have the skills to back it up, and you might get somewhere, but you won't get very far.
Exactly. Yeah. And people, you know, and this sounds kind of bad in a way, but you know, people are just not gonna, you know, they're not gonna pull you to the top, right? Like they just won't, because they have their own desires and things like that, and you know, they're not gonna help somebody else, you know, if it's not helping them. And it's human nature, right? Like, you know, it may sound bad, but I don't think it's really that bad.
No,
it's just how it is, right? So yeah, you have to. You have to learn people skills, you know. It's you know what? It's something that I feel like I have a lot to learn still.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting aspect of filmmaking as a creative pursuit. Like we're used to, I think, in our culture, looking at bands. It's like, oh, look at this huge band, whoever, U2, Metallica, whatever, like global bands, right? It's like the amount of, like, what makes that band successful is the ability of whatever, 4, 5, 6 guys to maintain a good relationship over the course of like 40 years being essentially married to each other. You know what I mean? Like guys have trouble maintaining friendships for several years, let alone like, no, our whole livelihood is dependent on us working that out. There's that. But we don't actually get a chance to talk about that because no one wants to hear that. You know, they want to hear about the thrill of being on stage. In the same way, being a filmmaker, it's like it's this giant collaborative effort involving hundreds of people. Like, you don't ever get to see that, though, right? You see J.J. Abrams or Steven Spielberg or whatever. You don't actually get to see them at work doing their people skills thing.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Like, and it's something, again, and this is why I want to say too, like, I'm not like an expert on that side of things because, you know, I'm still kind of like a loner in many ways.
Sure.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's you know, it's my internal makeup, but also like I'm sort of isolated geographically, and I'm sure it's something you want to talk about later too. But you know, there's that component to it, and yeah, in terms of a band, right? Like I have this band now, Electrum Fire, right? that I just started, but the band is just me. Like I'm the only guy.
Right.
Right? You know, but it's like, so what do I say? Do I call it a music project or what? Like how do I present this? And it's kind of like an experiment for me in many ways. So it's gonna be all over the place, I think, right? Which is fine. You know, like I'm not. It's a learning process for me too. But I'm like the only guy, so I'm like, okay, well, I'll just refer to it as a band, I guess. But you know, somebody asks me if they care, then tell them no, it's just me. I'm literally the only guy. You know, all the instrumentation, the vocals, the website, you know, like everything, right? So there's not a whole lot of collaboration going on there. But again, you know, with things like film, you have to, it has to be collaborative. It's really hard to pull it. Like you can have a small crew, like we had a pretty small crew on Hoaxed.
Yeah.
And a small crew can do a lot. I've you know, this one short I did back in 2014, I probably had about 30 people on set. You know.
Wow.
And there was a lot of egos that I had to deal with. Yeah. And things got a little heated sometimes. You know, it happens. It happened on more than one film that I've, you know, of mine. You know, it's part of the game. So I do have some experience there, and the last 2-3 years it's been, you know, I've been a one-man show pretty much. I did this one project just a few months ago with Lauren Southern on the American border, and great experience, but super tiny crew, super tiny. It turned out well. I'm very proud of it. As far as like, you know, of dealing with a large number of people, that really hasn't happened for a number of years now for me.
Yeah, and there's some benefit to that. You know, now that you have, you know, digital cameras and, you know, smaller, more lightweight, you know, LED kind of gear, you can run a pretty light crew versus having 30 people on set. Which film was that? Because the only other than American Mirage and Hoax, the only thing that I could really find was a clip on American. Is it American Drone? Is that the actor who's in that has a clip on his YouTube page.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So is that the film? Because that was a great clip. Like the actor was great.
Yeah, no, he was great, and yeah, he's a great guy. But what I'm talking about. So American Drone was 2013, and that was made for the Alex Jones, the InfoWars contest.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was done in a record time, like super cheap. I mean, it was a fun experience. Super small crew as well. Like I ran, you know, I did camera, cinematography. I did all the editing, audio, wrote the thing.
Wow.
You know, and obviously directed it as well, produced it. Like it was crazy. It's like 20 minutes long, which is really long for a short film.
Yeah, it is.
But but what I'm talking about, it's just it's sort of like this. It's like a dark comedy sort of that's set in the film world. It's called Short End, and it's on my Odyssey channel. I put all my shorts on there from way back when. But I just wanted to I wanted to level up. This was 2014, so this is a year before I decided, like, you know what, I'm done with this, and I'm going to BC. And I mean, it was a fun film and everything. I really enjoyed working with the actors on that. There's a lot of actors. It was like an ensemble cast kind of thing. And, you know, that was good. I had a lot of problems with the crew. Not the whole crew, you know, like one or two people, right? But that happens.
They know who they are.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into it, but they know who they are. They would agree. We just didn't get along on a personal level, but we wanted to work together because we were we both respected each other's talent.
Okay.
And so we wanted to work together, but it just didn't work out, like just on a personal level. And sometimes when you have that sort of conflict on set, it can actually be, you know, like a positive thing, you know, for the end result. For this, it was not. I didn't really feel that. So.
Right.
But yeah, I just wanted to do something that was like less controversial, because at that point I'd already done the 9/11 thing, and I did the American drone thing, both of which ended up on InfoWars, right? And it's not like I was ashamed of that or anything. Like I didn't hide that or anything. I just wanted to do something that was not in that wheelhouse. And I'm like, okay, let's try and do a comedy, which does not come naturally to me.
Yeah, doesn't seem.
So I did that. Yeah. So I did that, and I managed to finish it. It was a hell of a process, but I just, on some level, I just did not feel satisfied. Like, the world doesn't really need this. It was more like a vanity project, and I did not feel fulfilled with that. And that basically caused me to think, like, okay, well, what do I want to do with the skills and talents that I have, right? So,
and so that led you back more in the direction of more short films with like serious topics.
Yeah, well, that was the last short that I made.
Oh, okay.
Actually. Yeah, so a year after that, I mean, I did like smaller projects and stuff like that, but a year after that is when we left Toronto.
Okay.
And that was a year that my first son was born as well. So just a lot of changes that took place there.
Yeah, making unfulfilling comedy short films after your first son is born is probably not going to be on the list so much anymore.
Yeah. He wasn't born yet, but he was in the oven at that.
Sure.
Or right before, anyway.
Now, you mentioned that you're a little geographically isolated, and I know that you've recently moved to Mexico. What, you're in? Is it Merida? Out on the Yucatan.
That's right.
Yucatan Peninsula, maybe.
Yucatan. That's right. Yeah.
What's that been like? I mean, I follow you on Instagram, and so I get a little window into the life out there.
Right. It's been good, actually. Like I can't complain. The main issue is, again, I'm pretty isolated here.
Sure.
Like the last 2 years. So basically, in 2019, I was quite busy. I did two projects with Molyneux. There was this one other project I worked on that did not get finished. It's a whole other story, but I was quite busy. Like I made some good money that year and stuff like that. And then 2020 hits.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, the lockdowns and everything made it hard for me to fly, and all sorts of things. And just there were just no there was just no offers for work, basically.
No one was working
because nobody was working, right? And people are kind of unsure what to do. So basically, I just took a huge hit that year. And I tried to make some like online stuff work, like online business stuff, and I'm not the kind of person who can make that thing work. Right. And it was kind of a disaster.
Oh, man.
Anyway, it's a good experience. And I was just like super demoralized and things like that. Because moving to Mexico is something that my family's been, sort of at that point for like a few years, on and off discussing. And I was kind of open to the idea, right? But then I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it. Like when 2020 hit, like that really became a conversation in our family. When I say my family, I'm talking about my two parents and I've got one sibling, a brother.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So you're extended, you're a close family, like not your wife and your kids' family. Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking to her too, obviously.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, no, it was them, right? Like we all lived together in the same town. Like we moved together to that town in BC.
Oh, okay. That was the story that you told earlier. Got it.
So we were all together and in the same town, and so we were having this this conversation, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm not moving to Mexico. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to run away. Blah blah blah. Yeah. But then it is at some point like it just became like super clear to me like where Canada's headed.
Yeah.
And I've got two boys, right? And I don't want to send them to school in Canada. I don't want them to be forced to take a vaccine. So this is 2020. This is before there was any kind of vaccine.
Yeah, you saw it coming.
I knew there was a vaccine coming. I knew that they were going to going to make it mandatory, even though they were saying, "Oh, it will never be mandatory." I knew it was happening because, again, like I've been following this sort of thing at this point, like, for like 10 years at this point. So I knew how they work, how they think, and I knew it was coming. And I also knew, sadly to say, and some people may not agree and may have a problem with this, but you're not going to see a big fight in Canada. Which, again, to sort of go back and forth in time now, in beginning of this year when the whole convoy happened, I was pretty surprised. I did not expect that to happen. I supported it. I'm like, I donated to it, and I wanted them to succeed. But I also knew in the back of my mind, like, the government's going to crack down on these guys, like, super hard, and that's exactly what happened.
It disappeared.
Right, and it disappeared, right? So, there is some sense of, like, resistance there. I just don't personally think it's going to be enough. And I also thought about, like, okay, do I stay here and sort of, like, fight this thing or whatever? And I thought, you know what, with the skills that I have and the connections that I have, I'm better off somewhere else, doing it online. And at the same time, my family's out of harm's way. I don't want my wife to go through this stuff. I don't want my kids to go through this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So it was not a decision I wanted to make. I'm still kind of like, I still feel kind of like resentful that it was a decision I was forced to make. But I try and sort of take that resentment and have it fuel what I do, right? Because these bastards that have done this, they need to be taken down.
Yeah.
They need to be fought. They need to be resisted. So, the other day on Twitter, there was a comment like, "Oh, you ran away" or something, and I kind of like unloaded on them a little bit. But because I'm not, like, to me, this is more like it's more like a strategic retreat. I'm taking my family and myself out of harm's way, so I can be more effective in my new area.
Yeah.
So I'm here now. And it's like, and the people are wonderful here. These are really nice people. It's not perfect. Like, there's still a lot of mask wearing that goes on here. A lot of stores still want you to wear a mask when you go in.
Oh, wow.
So I don't go to many stores. It's been loosening up a little bit, but it's sort of like in the mentality here, but there won't be a vaccine mandate. So, there's that. And again, for now, this is where I'm at. I feel like I'm in exile, and I practically am in exile. And I sort of see myself that way. Like, yes, I'm not out of the fight. If anything, this will make me more effective. It's taken now. I've been here almost 2 years now. So in November, I will have been here 2 years. It's taken up until about a month ago for me to get to a point where I can, where I can say, like, okay, I can now keep going from where I was when I left.
Oh, wow.
It just took a while to get settled. And it's a lot of upheaval.
Yeah.
Right? So I definitely took a hit there. And again, a lot of dark moments, a lot of demoralization, but I'm aware why it's happening, right? So it's not like I'm confused about it or anything. So that's been a help as well. But I'm now ready. I'm now at a place where I feel like I can start to move forward again.
I want to dig into this a little bit because this is a subject that comes up for me all the time, and many of my male friends I have, who tend to frame things only in terms of fighting with, let's say, force of arms, right? And not really understanding that, okay, I'll speak about myself. Like, okay, yeah, you can put a rifle in my hands or a shovel in my hands or something like that. And, I can do just as well as the next guy. Maybe not as well as someone specially trained in ditch digging or, marksmanship, but I can still do a decent job. But for me and for who I am and what I can do, there are other ways that I can be much more effective. That doesn't mean I have to be on the front lines. And I find that and now there's still some part of me that's like, I should be doing this other thing. But I think that there are other ways that I can make a more powerful contribution because of who I am. And it's a real, I can relate very much to your struggle. Like, am I running away? Am I avoiding my responsibility? But for me to hear you tell that story, it's like, no, you're doing what you have to protect your unique skills and abilities, because they would be wasted in other circumstances. Like, if you were in Canada right now, what would you be doing?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is too, is like, when I was in Canada, like it was, it's a high cost of living country, and back then it was like now with inflation, it's insane. And I would not have financially survived had I stayed.
There you go.
Moving to Mexico just made it possible for me to not go, to not go tits up, right? So it's like, and that wasn't even on my mind when we made the decision to make it. But since we got here, I'm like, oh man, like we can live way cheaper here than back in Canada. So I would have been way more stressed out there. I've been like more worried about like money.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of it as well that a lot of people don't understand. And now people are getting squeezed with inflation. Like rents are super high, and housing costs are just insane, and the grocery costs, and now all the stuff they're doing with the farms, like what's happening in the Netherlands now, they're going to do that in Canada as well. So that country's getting squeezed like crazy. And there are some people that will be more effective there.
Sure.
And that need to stay there, right? And God bless them, and I support them, and I want them to succeed, and I do a lot of prayer for them. But for me personally, that was not the right move, right? So, and most of my work, most of my connections were in the U.S. I deal with, I deal with more Americans than not. So for me being in Mexico is kind of like how it was, pre-pandemic in Canada. Like I'm just in a different country, but I can fly. Okay, so there's a vaccine mandate. Flying into the U.S.
for you.
There's some ways around it because when we were on the project on the U.S. border project,
American Mirage with Lauren Southern.
Yeah, we walked across, into the U.S. No, like through a border crossing, we did not do it illegally.
Oh, okay.
But we went through a land border crossing. They just didn't ask us for a vaccine. They just didn't ask us.
Sure.
So we just walked through. We were in the U.S. For like a few hours to go get some shots of the wall there, right? But so it's not super tightly enforced, and there are ways to get in. So it's not perfect, but it's like in Canada, since like November 2021 up until a few weeks ago, you could not leave the country if you were unvaccinated unless you went through a foreign airline and they maybe don't check you, or if you walk across and they maybe don't check you. But it's there's just way more restrictions, right? So anyway, I still feel that it was the right move for me to come down here. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and you're keeping your family safe too. Like there's your individual concerns about financial concerns, professional concerns, etc. as a man, but you've got your sons and your wife to think about, and that changes the whole equation, right? Like that alone. And I didn't realize. I mean, I'm happy to hear that Canada's letting people out. I mean, last I had heard, you couldn't leave the country without getting vaccinated. That's insane. Like you can't travel on trains.
Yeah.
It's
totally nuts. You can't. Yeah, you could not board a plane domestically even. And it's coming back. I just want to be. It's temporary. They made as much clear in their statements and stuff. They're really a bunch of evil people, and it's coming back. So now, like, if you're in Canada, you want to get out. Now would be a good time to
yeah.
do it. And like, you know what? When this vaccine mandate, when this vaccine mandate was announced last year in September or whatever it was, the amount of people that arrived here from Canada is insane.
Yeah.
There are so many Canadians here. So me and my family, we were early. When we showed up, there was like we were the only Canadians, right? In November 2021 and like October, there was a huge influx. And now you have people literally leaving everything behind and just coming here with what they, had on a suitcase.
Wow.
Many of them are still here. Like they literally fled the country.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, like my one good friend, now with the vaccine mandate got lifted, he's back to now to go and to go and tie up some loose ends that he was not able to get to before he left. Right? And he doesn't even want to go back. He's like, it doesn't feel like it's my country anymore. Right? So it's really sad. There's a lot of heartache and things like that. But you got to do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. Like, it's that kind of time in history now, and you have to take action.
Yeah, in self-preservation, right? Like I think that's the tension that so many men are carrying right now, which is the tension between wanting to go to quote unquote war, fight back, resist, whatever that energy is, versus the energy of self-preservation. Like, how do I lock down and solidify what I've got and build a strong base to push back from? And we're forced to do both at the same time at high speed, right? And now, personally, I think that the acceleration of the Great Reset is a good thing. I think the faster they go with it, the more chaotic it's going to be, and the more pushback and the more reckless it'll be. Regardless, that increases the stress level of everybody, right? Because you have to do more at once under duress. But it makes success, their long-term success, less likely, but it makes us frantic, and men are they're losing calibration, they're losing focus, they're losing friendships. But it feels like the times are almost designed to, like, how hard can we squeeze people before something happens?
Right, and I do get the sense that these new world order types and the Klaus Schwab types and these assholes, that they're sort of getting nervous. Right?
Sure, they should be.
I don't know if I can, but it's. They seem to be getting nervous. They want to step things up, and people are noticing more and more. But like I said, it brings a lot of chaos, into the mix, and it's really important to, like you said, you have to keep centered. You have to keep calibration. I mean, it's something that I've struggled with. Yeah. The last, this year, I've struggled immensely.
Same.
With that. I was going to be clear, immensely, and it's especially that, plus you're isolated, right?
In a foreign country.
And again, these people are wonderful. I really love the Mexicans, right? And they don't look at you like you're here and like, oh, screw this gringo, whatever. It's fun. They're happy to see you, So it's really been good. But it's not my country.
Right.
This is not my country. And I don't even know if I have a country. I feel more affinity with the U.S. because
come to Phoenix.
Well, we'll see. Maybe in the future that would happen. But it's like this whole, and we're in a war already. It's just not a hot war yet. In some places, maybe it is with this whole situation in Ukraine. It's debatable, but we're not in a hot war yet. But we are in a war already. So, and this is where things like, making music and songs and movies, whatever, it helps. And people doing like really good journalism, those things matter because, those are like the weapons of war right now. And then also spiritual prayer, like the whole thing in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, put on the armor of God. Like, these are things that are no longer like these cute little, statements that you say in church. Like, it's practical. It's very, it should have been practical all along, but now you can really see the need.
Yes.
And that's how we fight now, right? So you have to be in the fight wherever you are. And you have to look at where can it be most effective, and look at your options. Now, if you're in the U.S., absolutely, you should own guns. You should and know how to use them. In Canada, I own guns. I know how to use guns. I had to leave them behind. That was also hard for me. It's like I'm going to a country where I'm not allowed to own guns. Okay. At the same time, it's like, okay, so I have guns in Canada. What am I going to do? Like, okay, if there's a breakdown in society, and there's looters coming, yes, I can protect myself, and that's important. But, at the same time, I don't want to focus on all the bad things that can happen. I need to focus on what I need to accomplish. I need to focus on my mission. And that told me, like, okay, you have to give up your guns now on a personal level and move to a country where you can't own them so you can be more effective for your mission, right? So that was a tough, because a lot of people, they really idolize and make a god out of guns.
They do.
And I'm super pro-gun, Second Amendment. God bless you guys for having that. Buy as many guns as you can, buy ammo, learn how to use it, and and also get like tactical training, because a lot of people just go to the gun range and with their beer, right, and they just like stand there still shooting at a still target,
flat range.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So, but anyway, that aside, it's like you have that option in America, so make use of it and have it. But like that is not. It's not your mission. Like you still have a mission that is more important than And thank God that you have the ability to get guns, but the guns, it's not your mission, right? So it's something to keep in mind, like.
Well, this is where faith becomes really important, because you're absolutely right. There are a lot of guys that make idols out of guns, and I won't just say that's an American thing, right? To sort of lose. So religion has been taken, particularly Christianity, has been taken out of American culture systemically, let's say for the past 60 to 70 years. And even the religion within American culture, within Christianity, as I'm discovering day by day, is it's been systemically weakened as well, right? So presence in the center of culture has been removed, and then even the ability to push back from within the religion is gone. And so men look for idols, and firearms give men a sense of power. And so does going to the gym, and there's nothing wrong with either of these things. But when it becomes an idol, when you don't have something above that, it's really easy to lose sight of yourself, of your mission, of what's really important in pursuit of the idol.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You have to keep first things first, right? And you will be tested on that.
Amen.
Like life will test you on that. Right. Yeah, there was something I was going to say there and I forgot. Anyway. Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to say about, like the Second Amendment, like in my mind, the Second Amendment, it has already served its purpose.
Yeah.
So obviously you want to make sure that, that they won't be successful in repealing the Second Amendment in America. But even if they do today, like it, you still have your guns.
Yeah.
You're still not going to give them up.
Right.
Right. And if anything, that would basically set off a war that may be inevitable at this point anyway. So it's just like, some people are so like freaked out. Oh, they're going to take the Second Amendment away. It's already done what it had to do, because at that point the law becomes more and more meaningless. And people are starting to wake up to that, right? So, but yeah, obviously you want to safeguard it as long as possible, just to smooth things over, I guess. But yeah, I just want to make that.
No, it's a great point. It's really important. You had said we're at war, and I regard COVID as a declaration of war. It was. I mean, it was even in the moment, and even back in February, March 2020, my buddy Tim is also Canadian, also from Toronto, and Tim and I were talking about that. He lives in Australia, and he and I were talking about that. We're like, okay, we can already see where this is going. There's going to be a vaccine that's going to be mandated. Now, we didn't know anything about mRNA at the time, so we just thought it was going to be your standard, garden variety, garbage vaccine. So I actually still have stuff to detox from vaccines in my fridge, just in case it was, but we didn't know that, now, by the way, there's a study that came out of, what is it, Israel, Sweden, something like that just came out like today. I watched a YouTube video about it, that the mRNA vaccine actually is modifying DNA. That study is now out. And it's,
there's like video clips of Bill Gates in like 2018 or 2015 or something. He was talking about that exact thing.
Yeah.
I think what he said was like, it's like an mRNA/DNA vaccine.
Oh man.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, no, and if you had to do what you had to do to avoid that, run. You got to leave your guns behind to flee Canada, to flee. And by the way, I know what you mean about the pushback isn't going to be strong, because within Canada, because I've traveled more than 30 countries around the world, and I've spent time in Commonwealth countries, so Australia, New Zealand, less so in Canada, but also in the UK. And as great as those people are, as great as the culture is, there's the spirit of fight just is not in those countries. I was in New Zealand just before 2020. I spent almost 2 years there in total cumulative. And it's just like, as much as I love the Kiwis, they're great people and they're beautiful islands. The people there, they don't have that American rebel spirit. They just don't. Right. And it's the same in Australia. It's like, there's the pushback doesn't, that's why it's got to come from America or American inspired people who do live around the world.
Right. No, that's true. And with America, like you have the story of your founding. Like you were birthed in a war, a war for independence, a war for liberty, a war for freedom. And yeah, like it can get a little, like jingoistic every now and then. But you know what? It's still very important because it's like it's like imprinted on your psyche, right? And that. It matters. It matters so much because, like, if you look at Canada, like, that nation was formed through basically political agreements, right? Oh wow! And in 1982, so it was always like it was always like officially part of the UK, I guess. And then in 1982, there was a process called the repatriation of the Constitution. So that's when Canada gained its own constitution and became like a nation in its own right. But back in 1867 is when what they call confederation is when that happened. So it's basically federalism, and they basically agreed like, okay, this is going to be a country where you have provinces, and they're going to have their own governments, and we will have like a federal government. So it was just like an agreement. There was no fight for that. And again, a lot of the losers of the American Revolution, they were known as the Loyalists. They went to Canada, right? Because back then I guess it was known as British North America, right? So they went to essentially Britain and North America, and a lot of those people, a lot of them were not bad people. Like for example, Simcoe, he did a lot to basically settle large parts of Ontario and things like that. These were solid men, but there's no, there's no huge fight for your liberty imprinted in the psyche there.
Yep.
And it's sad, and also, a lot of people don't know this about Canada, and a lot of Canadians don't know this. Like, they have some of the best, how should I say, they have some of the best fighters in the world in terms of the military. 1917 in Vimy Ridge, they were known as like shock troopers, and they basically scared the shit out of the Germans. 1942, they ran this Normandy assault on France that ended in disaster, but it was like a lot of bravery was displayed there in Dieppe. And then, to this day, like we have the best, we have the world's best snipers, but people don't know this because it doesn't get talked about.
Sure.
In 1993, I think it was, there was a Canadian contingent that was sent on like a UN peacekeeping mission. So I think it was Croatia or something, or at the time Yugoslavia, something like that. And they came under fire from, I forget which country it was, but, there were way more of them than there were of Canadians. And they beat their asses back and didn't lose a single guy. And then it was official government policy to put a gag order on that in the media. They were not allowed to talk about it because they did not want, to quote, tarnish the peacekeeping view that the world has of Canadians.
That's a surprise.
Yeah, and I'm just like, wow, you do something extraordinary, it should be celebrated.
Yeah.
No, it's like, no, we're politically correct, right? And that spirit has really infected that country to a debilitating degree, to the point where they elected this idiot. And
he is an idiot.
Now his true nature is coming out because he's got full power, right? So it's really sad, and it's, in my view, too little, too late. They're going to go through hell. We'll see what happens after that. I don't know. Yeah. Hopefully they don't get taken over by some multinational organization or whatever.
Right.
Hopefully there will be an opportunity to rise from the ashes, but there will be ashes.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with so much of what you said that America's founding mythos, is really important. And not just the founding in war, but also the expansion into the American West, the frontier mentality that lives in the deepest level of our psyches, this notion of Americans are very practical people. They're very down home people. At our best, right? At our best. Right. And very get the job done kind of people, very individualistic. And, like I said, I've traveled the world, and that individualistic mindset exists no place else in the world, because no other country has the same founding mythos, or if at least it does, it's so far back. And Americans just don't understand the difference that makes. Now, not every country in the world needs to think like America does, but the world needs a country that thinks like America does, is what I tell people. Because so many liberals, they absolutely take for granted things they can't understand, and only traveling to other countries, particularly developing countries like Mexico, or go to India, or go to China, and you can see countries with completely different developing mythologies that approach life very differently. But most people will go to Europe. It's like, oh, everything's so great here. I can have wine on the sidewalk. We should live like this in America. It's like,
it's very civilized, and it's very sophisticated. But what ends up happening is you lose, that sort of rugged mentality.
Yes.
That gets the job done, right? And movies like Gone with the Wind speak to that. It's like rugged individualism and fighting for your land and things like that. It's so deep in the American psyche. And what's interesting is that movie was basically like soft censored by like Netflix, like we put a disclaimer up. We're more about Black Lives Matter and all this crap. Right? And it is true. There's this one particular character, this like young Negro woman, as they would say.
Yeah.
That is not. It's not a very positive portrayal.
Sure.
Right. But you have to remember, this movie came out in 1939. Okay.
Right.
At the same time, there's a lot to be learned about American spirit in that movie, and you don't want to get rid of that. What's interesting is that movie was banned before in the world in Germany by Hitler. Mm-hmm. And not the movie, sorry, but I don't know if it was a movie or not, but he banned the book because he did not want people to understand this like rugged individualism. Because again, the Nazis, they're socialists.
Sure,
they were national socialists,
mm-hmm.
and you don't want that kind of thinking, to take root in your country if you're going to run like a socialistic system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun and interesting. Like they really try and like if you have a strong government, you don't want that thinking in your people, because it makes them ungovernable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the job of Americans right now, is to become ungovernable.
Mm-hmm. And to bring back this sense of, go ahead,
or at least remain ungovernable, right?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of Americans are fundamentally ungovernable. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't more that deeply want to be governed, that can't imagine, and that's the big split, right? That lives in the middle of the American psyche right now, which is there are some people like myself, and probably plenty of people who listen to this podcast are like, yeah, no, I have no need or want to be governed. I'm able to self-govern. I don't not do wrong things because they're illegal. I don't do wrong things because they're wrong. And then there are other people that absolutely, for whatever reason, need to be governed, or it's probably more along the lines of they feel powerless, and so they need to govern others, or they need others to feel as powerless as they do. Is probably what it is. And that's a big split that lives in the American psyche that's been cultivated for a very long time. And, I don't know how that gets resolved. That's the thing. It's like, I don't know that those two people can live comfortably in a nation together. The people that require government, they would like to use the institutions of government, media, medicine, law, finance, and use the institutions against people like me and others to try and get them to capitulate. But what I say is that that's soft power. It's like you can shame people in the media, but ultimately you can't compel them. You can take away their livelihood, you can take away their reputation, but there aren't any jackbooted thugs in the streets. There's a video on Twitter, or you get highlighted on the news. It's like, well, that's not the same as physically compelling someone to do a thing. And that's the thing that I don't know is able to happen so much here, or even in Sri Lanka. Like Sri Lanka ran out of military members to control their populations. I don't even know what's going on there, but that's the big question for me.
Yeah, and that also is the big secret. Like what happened there can happen in any country, because
Sure.
there are more of us than there are of them, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why you need to divide and conquer your own population, right? So you see this in Canada a lot. In Canada, I knew for a long time now, but it really became like a reality with this whole pandemic stuff, that your most immediate threat is not the government, it's not the police, it's your neighbor. Because they will see you, not abide by the mandate or the rule or whatever, and they'll snitch on you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just a sad reality, because they've been so successful at divide and conquer. Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's cowardice. It's cowardice, right? And that's the saddest thing, is to see people we know, people we love, people we once even trusted, absolutely capitulate and absolutely lose their minds, and turn their neighbor, their friend, their family member into the enemy. And that's a phenomenon that I think can only be understood spiritually. I don't think that there's a terrestrial explanation for it.
So the next song I'm writing is about this exact same thing.
Okay. Yeah, go for it. Because I want to get into the project, because it kind of brings a lot of things together. Like you talked about Ephesians and your filmmaking history and making films for InfoWars, and how to fight back the cultural war while being isolated, how to do it all yourself. I mean, it's really all coming together in your band project now, which I think is great.
Yeah. So the band project thing is interesting, because it's something I've wanted to do since like 2002. I think maybe even before I wanted to like be a filmmaker, I've wanted to have a band, right? It's like most teenagers. Well, at that point, I was 18. You want to have a band, right? Like, I'm going to play guitar. I couldn't sing. Basically, and so I'm like, I need to find a good singer, and I need a band. Like, I need a drummer and stuff. So we, at that time, it was in a very small church that my dad pastored as well in Canada, and we had like a little youth group there, and we had a drummer, we had a bassist, me on the guitar, and we had a singer, whatever sort of, and we're like, let's make a band happen. And it was okay. Like, we had a few gigs here and there. It was like super Christian, stuff. And it was fun, but it's like, it was more like a pastime, for the other band members. Whereas for me, I wanted to take it more seriously. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of, it just fell apart, like not in a bad way or anything. Sure. Like, it wasn't acrimonious or anything, but it just kind of just fizzled out. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to make my own music. And I started, back then it's like, I bought this like, it's like a PC sound card, really, really low quality. And I just couldn't get the right, like, distortion sound that I wanted. And so I just gave up, right? Mm. But I mean, back, I had this vision back then of wanting to do what I'm basically doing now, which is make music that has like more of like a political bent to it, mm-hmm. and a spiritual bent to it. And, I feel like I was like uniquely, suited to do that. But, now looking back, it's probably a good thing it didn't work out, because I was maybe like mentally not ready, mm-hmm. either. And that's what I'm realizing now more. But anyway, so when we moved to Mexico, it's like you sort of, I kind of fell off the map in 2020, right? And then moved to Mexico. Yeah, like I did some work on Jack Posobiec's Antifa movie, and I even have like a little cameo in there. And then I did this little short film in BC called Super Spreader that I just wanted to get it out of my system. Yeah. I just wanted to make something again, because the whole year I didn't do anything. But then we moved to Mexico and then all that, so I just kind of fell off the map. and you get to the point where like, you know, you feel kind of forgotten, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like everybody's moved on without me, and I'm just kind of stuck here, you know. And it's not a great feeling.
No.
Right. So, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make a song. I'm gonna go back to this old idea I had of making music like this. And so I made a song last year called Act of War. And I just put it out like under my own name or whatever. And it did reasonably well. Like, you know, Mike Cernovich, you know, he basically tweeted it out. And I had it on YouTube. And a lot of people started to like watch this thing. And like 2 days later, YouTube just banned it because it was against the vaccine. Right?
I remember that.
Yeah, so I put on Odyssey, and it kind of slowed down there, and it was like, I think there's like 6,000 views on it.
It's not bad.
But it mostly proved to me that I can do this because, again, like I was never really a singer. And I just kind of went for it with this song, and I'm like, okay, like it's still a little rough and raw and whatever. I'm not like the best singer, and I don't, you know, I don't want to seem like I am, but I'm good enough to make it happen. And with some software, you can sort of like auto-tune a little bit and things like that. And it sounded okay, right? So I'm like, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to do this as a side project, and when I'm not working on another project, it'll be the main project, right? So yeah. That's what I did. So then the doc with Lauren happened. So I was busy with that for like 4 or 5 months, and then I went back to this thing. So I was working on the song that I just put out like last week called Exit Babylon. I started recording it in like October last year, and then I put it on hold for the project for the doc. So when that was done, I got back to it, finished it. It took a very long time because, you know, I'm also learning how to like mix audio. Right?
So it is a process.
And it's not simple. I've learned that.
Yeah.
It just took a long time, but it's out there now, and I feel like, you know, what I work on now, like the next one is going to be a lot quicker, and you know, I'm not going to care too much about like with the music videos. You know, if it's low budget and cheap, it's low budget and cheap. You know, it's a music video. I don't really care that much. So I just want to put the stuff out. So I'm going to be working on that. You know, it's a slow process. You know, but it's something I need to do for me as well because I will go insane if I can't make stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you get to take all these thoughts, all these experiences, and roll them up into something and create a creative product. Because I know what you mean. When you're not putting stuff, when you're a creative person and you're not putting stuff out, the feeling can be a little bit like, well, what have you done for me lately? Where did you go? You know, and because there's so much content that's available now, it's really easy for people to just forget and move on to the next thing. You know, and the feeling as a creator is starting to become irrelevant almost. But you know, but if you have things to say and observations to make, how are you going to capture that? And what I like about the Exit Babylon song and the video too is, you know, Christian music is not famous for being particularly good, and good Christian music is not famous for being particularly Christian. Right. So that you've managed to create something that has edge and grit and strength, and that actually makes a strong political and religious statement, I thought was really impressive. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I mean, it's not going to be like overtly. You know what? I'm not going to try and you know, like make a brand like super consciously.
Right.
It's what I feel is going to come out. So yes, there'll be a lot of Bible references and things like that, but it won't be just that. You know, it'll just be what I feel like. You know, I need to say at this particular moment. So I'm excited, but I think with that too, like it will be authentic. It will be genuine. I'm not going to pander or anything like that.
Can I ask you a little?
If people like it,
go ahead.
Great. No, I'm just going to say, if people like it, great. That'd be awesome. Then it'd be nice to like you know, basically make a living off it. But like I said, I'm not going to try and have it be something just so it can be successful. It'll be authentic first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, you get to It's an act of self-expression, right? And that's always the thing with music, probably music mostly because you can make stuff that panders to the crowd, that's popular, that's hip, that you know is going to be successful, but that isn't necessarily what you actually want to say, right? And especially when you're a one-man kind of crew, right? Like you handle all the conceptual and all the creative and all the execution. So, you know, you're the one navigating alone versus like having to do it in collaboration with a band where different men have different agreements. Like, no, you get to decide. But what's most, I mean, we were talking earlier about strategic retreat and fighting the battle on the terms that we can fight on. Like, that's what the exercise is, right? It's like, this is your ability to fight. And you know, I'll probably, for the introduction to this podcast, I'll probably play a segment of the song. So people listening at this point will have heard at least some of it, not the whole thing. So I'll recommend they go to YouTube and listen to the thing entirely. But, you know, I think that's a strong position to fight from, especially with the things that you have to say and that you can actually make out what the lyrics are. Although I watched the lyric video that helped, but you're delivering a message and you don't need anyone's permission. You know, making a film is like, you need some amount of permission. I mean, I suppose there are ways to not, but for this is like, well, I got stuff to say. I'm out here. I'm just going to say it. And that's where some of the best creative expression happens. Right.
Yeah. You know, there's pros and cons to both.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, no, it's something that I feel needs to be done for me. And hopefully it's meaningful to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I want to serve people with that, and maybe bring some sort of color to their lives with it, and also just like like a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, like a like a vicarious sort of expression for them too, and that's what music does.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to something that really, a song that like really resonates with you, it does something to you. Like it makes life, it sort of opens up like a small part of life that wasn't there before,
mm-hmm.
right? And it makes it more interesting. It's more dynamic. There's, like more dimensions to your life a little bit, and that's what art does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important too. And I think too, especially with my music, is I've known from before, like it's going to sound aggressive. A lot of it's going to sound very aggressive. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's something that's missing. Like like what you do with your work is you want to serve men, right, mm-hmm. and have them be their best selves. I think something that's been really beaten out of us as a whole is aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a bad thing. You go to school, you get into a fist fight. There's punishment, mm-hmm. right? Whereas if you maybe like if you like verbally abuse somebody, that sort of gets like skimmed over, right? But guys are not like that. Like, inherently, like we're gonna use our fists, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's that like male aggression. It's not a bad thing. It can be used very destructively, but there's if you want to have a good strong society, you need men to be aggressive in whatever. Like if you're an architect, you have to have a drive to like accomplish things so you can make these amazing buildings, right? It requires aggression. Like it's there for a reason. God put it there for a reason. And it gets really frowned upon, looked down upon. It gets beaten out of us. We've got like so many weak men who are it's like they're afraid of their own shadow kind of thing. It needs to be expressed more. And if I can help sort of awaken that feeling in guys, but also like sort of maybe help steer it in a positive and like joyful direction, because mm-hmm. you can have like joy and anger together, like working together. You can have
that's holy.
Yeah, it's like be angry, do not sin, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's a real need for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked how in that first song you pulled off like a 9 Inch Nails kind of industrial vibe, but 9 Inch Nails is completely like demonic music. I had no idea how bad it was. Just even the name.
It's super aggressive.
Yeah,
and it's funny because it's like, when I put that out, I started seeing a bunch of comments like, "Oh, it sounds like 9 Inch Nails." I'm like, okay, like I know 9 Inch Nails, I know some songs, but I started listening to it more because of that. I'm like, holy crap! Like this is it's pretty dark.
Yeah.
Like, and it's angry. And you know what? I do have a respect for that anger, but it's got to be wielded in a more constructive, positive way, right? Because otherwise, you get to some dark places, man.
Easily.
Dark places, yeah, and especially these days too. And it's something. I don't know. I don't want to glorify it or anything, but you kind of need to go through some like darkness, I think, a little bit, so you can understand what you're dealing with, and there's danger there. If you don't respect that, you can fall victim to it more, right? So, yeah, like you have to understand that you have, like, maybe, as they say, a dark side, like the psychologists will say dark side or whatever. But you can't give into it. You can't surrender to it. You can use it and and maybe like redirect it into a better, to something that's positive and constructive and helps other people.
And I think that's something that I think Christian men need in particular is a more intimate familiarity with not just anger, but I think a sense of personal power that anger is really linked to. Right, like my experience of Christians and Christianity from the outside was very much that these were men that weren't really connected with any amount of anger or angst or anything like that, and from the inside, from having to reconcile that with myself and then becoming Christian, I don't find any contradiction between Christianity and that, and so but I've been trying to find the language around it. But I think the unique, I guess what we say, contours of our age is that, like, now you got to find it. Because your family, right? Not necessarily your family, but I mean our families, our livelihoods, our nation, our world is under attack. And where are you going to find the energy, the personal power from to push back meaningfully, if not from anger? Like as long as it's righteous anger. And how do we teach men what righteous anger is? Music is always a great way, but where's the righteous, angry Christian music? Is there any?
Yeah,
there's one song. I know one song. It's yours. Really true.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's like, so many of us, especially especially those of us who are believers and are Christians, we're deathly afraid, as you are raised in that sort of environment, like. You become deathly afraid of being naughty.
Yeah.
Or like not following the rules, right? And so a sort of conformity is like imprinted on you.
Sure.
And
the stakes are
high.
That is
a real liability. Yeah. It's a real liability right now.
Yeah.
And too many Christians, they and here's the thing too, like this, this whole idea of like suppressing your dark side, it has merit in my view.
Sure. Because
these people who think that, and this is why I see so much virtue signaling today. Because if you look at the left now, it's a new kind of religion, and that point's been made over and over again on Twitter.
Yep.
But it's true, and there's a dark side there that they don't want to acknowledge. So, but it's there. It bothers them, so they virtue signal, and there's a lot of projection, and that's the kind of thing that will one day finds its expression in becoming like a camp guard, or some sort of a tyrant.
Oh, sure, camp guard. Okay, yeah,
a camp guard, like a Nazi, right? Because and people don't want to realize that you and me, we have the potential to be the Nazi camp guard, right? The left has that potential, and they're very close to that potential, and I would say they've already reached that potential in many ways. And it's like if you don't understand that it's there, then how can you make sure that you don't go there? Right? Like, it's there. I'm not going to go there, right? That's a dark, evil path. I'm not going to fall victim to it. I'm going to do this thing instead. I'm going to put my faith in God. I'm going to, whatever. But like you need some sort of expression of that, like anger maybe, or things that maybe get looked down upon a little bit. You have to express it in a way that's constructive, like I was saying before.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, man, some nasty and twisted things begin to happen, and we're seeing that on a social, like on a society-wide scale now. And I think a lot of that comes because men are not allowed to be men anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like wading into these topics too much because there's so much there's so many crystallized like thoughts and beliefs on this stuff, like the manosphere type stuff. I try and avoid that. I see a lot of like a lot of stupidity there.
A ton. I can talk for at length about that.
And I'm sure when it first started, like it was maybe there may be good reasons behind why it started.
Yeah.
But then people see, oh, I can make a living off this. So
Yes.
I'm going to pander to an audience.
Yes.
I'm going to say what they want to hear, and no longer what they need to hear, right? So then it becomes this like incestuous market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes way off kilter. So and it's like that with anything really. So the whole manosphere type stuff, it's just it needs to come to like its natural end, I think, at some point. But at the same time, there is merit to the view that because men are not men anymore, society has just gone into breakdown. Like you can blame women all you want and feminism. That stuff would not have taken place if men knew what they were dealing with and who they were. That stuff would have never happened.
Right.
So, and you take extreme ownership of that. You take extreme responsibility of that, but that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tons of thoughts I can share about all that. Just real quick about the manosphere. This is something that I've studied at length for a number of years. And, I think the manosphere, I think of it in terms of like technology, right? The manosphere was a really useful technology for a time. It allowed men to come together and put together some interesting ideas and crack some codes and really benefit men's lives. But now the manosphere is an outdated technology. It's an outdated tech. It's not. Some men are at that stage in their journey where they still do need that technology, right? Like your first computer doesn't need to be, a supercomputer. Your first computer can be some sort of iPad. You know what I mean? But for men that are trying to make progress in their lives towards family and prosperity and righteousness and all that stuff, the manosphere does not serve them anymore. And you're right that, there were some interesting ideas early on, and then the hangers-on come in and recognize that they can make money regurgitating, and injecting poison into men and getting money out. There's a lot of that, and it's a shame. It's a shame. And
I just want to say, like when I first learned about what that was, It was already kind of at that stage. So I was already like, okay, this is not something I'm not going to associate myself with this really. But there are some ideas there that do have merit. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and the ideas, well, like, look, the manosphere came out of the pickup artist era, right? Which was late 90s, early 2000s. It was an evolution out of that. And that whole world was, about promiscuity and, quote unquote, notch counts and it was observations about women and feminism and all this stuff. So the manosphere is rooted in, we might generously call materialistic values, right? That's where the soil that it was grown out of. And so you can only, a tree by its fruits, right? Bad tree doesn't bear good fruit. And so ultimately what I think is going on is the manosphere tree is beginning to bear fruits that go back to the roots of it back in the pickup artist era, and it cannot grow beyond that because a lot of men who made a lot of money in that world lived promiscuous, fallen lifestyles. And so what are they going to do? Are they going to, praise God, I hope that they disavow all of it and they come to Jesus, they make a confession of faith and a public repentance and say, I was wrong. But people aren't great at that. It's not, I hope that, but I think the manosphere is hitting that ceiling of like, hey, you're not going to be able to go any further in serving men until you repent of your past life. And some guys are like, my livelihood is based on this. My reputation is based on this. And I'm not going to give it all up. So, okay. The men who are looking will look somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. And just real quick about the anger part, you said, about men experiencing their anger, I think I want to just kick this idea around that there is something to, you post pictures of in the gym, and how important that is, because I think physical fitness and combat sports give men a chance to experience their anger in a productive way, and that you can't let it out at the office, but you can let it out over the weights in the ring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's very important, and it's helped me a lot. Look, I don't want to make it seem like it's like a solution to having like internal whatever,
right.
Doubts and conflicts and also especially insecurity, right? But it does help. It does help. It has helped me a lot. And like this last year too, like it was a tough time for me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I'm still not completely out of the woods yet. But I know for a fact if I did not go and, if I did not go to the gym regularly, I would have been a complete basket case by now. For sure. So it really matters. I highly, highly recommend it. And for some people, maybe it's like, they do something else that's, that involves like, that involves like a lot of physical activity. But you can't go wrong if you lift weights. Really, it's, in my view, it's non-negotiable. If you want to be effective too, and it's not just because you want to look good and look big and intimidating or whatever, maybe that's why you first go to the gym in the beginning, but you will soon realize this is more for my mind than anything else.
Mm-hmm. It's a spiritual practice, right?
Right. I think so. Yeah.
Can you talk about your pickup basketball game? I see you post pictures of the basketball court in Merida often. I'm curious about that. I don't know.
No, we do it every Saturday. So there's a whole bunch of expats here, like I was saying.
Sure.
Lots of Canadians, a few Americans even as well. And we just got together a few months ago and started to play basketball on Saturdays, and it's been great, and it's like all ages, and there's like last Saturday, like this past Saturday, this one kid is like, I don't know, 13 or 14. He just floored everybody else, but it was great, because I'm like, late 30s now, and I'm running on a basketball court with these like 13-year-olds, and not being a complete useless joke of a person on the court, so it's like, it's good, right? And there's one guy here, he's in his 50s, but he used to do CrossFit, and he's in like amazing shape. He's not muscle bound or anything, but he can run a whole game, and like we play in the heat.
Mm-hmm.
We play, and it's hot here.
Yeah.
So we play in the heat, and we're sweating buckets. Like the locals here are like, you guys are crazy. Why are you playing right now? Like under the sun, like you're
crazy
nuts.
Gringos.
But we're having a great time, and and it's team sports. Like you have to work with people, and it's just been wonderful experience. So if you can do something like that where you're at too, it does wonders for sure.
Are you able to keep up your spiritual life out there in Mexico? Like, I mean, I don't know if your father's a pastor, so you're probably having trouble finding Protestant churches. Probably a lot of Catholic churches out there.
Right. So this is a bit of an issue for me, to be honest.
I was wondering.
There are, as far as I know, two Protestant churches. I would say two evangelical churches here that do offer services in English.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been to a single one.
Oh.
So, but my dad runs a small group here. I haven't been there in a little while too. I have to be honest. I haven't been there in a little while, but that's more a model that I think is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Is like a small group model, right? Where you see your friends, and you're more likely to like ask questions and like engage in conversation and so. Mm-hmm. It's more like what you see read about in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. But now, for me personally, and it's something I will go back to. But like I was saying, I've been going through a pretty dark time the last little while, and I just wanted to sort of I just wanted to like go even more isolated for a while and just deal with my, just deal, with my crap internally, right? Because, what basically led me to that last little while, I just realized like I'm hitting a ceiling in many ways, in many areas of my life. Okay, like I don't want to blame the fact that I'm not where I should be on the fact that I'm like in a different country and things like that, right? So I just came to face the fact that like I need to make deep changes, and it's been it's been a pretty how do I say this? Like it's been a roller coaster of a process, and a lot of upheavals, personally. So as far as church goes, so I grew up in the church. I saw a lot of good things, and I learned how to like love the Bible in church, and that's something I will always cherish. I also saw a lot of bad things. And the church that I grew up in, we were in the evangelical movement, and it's really hip today to like really, say bad things about the evangelicals.
Sure.
A lot of it is very, very true. A lot of it is very true. But they have some, things that are very good about them. Okay. Now, not all of them are the same. So my dad, as a pastor, was always sort of like an outsider, like he didn't really fit in with like the other pastors and things like that. Like he's a very genuine guy. And he's extremely principled. Like he's not going to do something because it's popular. He's not going to do something because it might, bring more people into the church and things like that, right? Like very, very principled. So, and that's, that's been a really good example to me in my life. But I've seen how that movement, the evangelical movement, has lost its way, right? And, I used to be on the music team in church. And, and some of these things that were not healthy to the movement, it really did affect us as well. Okay. It just because, like you're in that stream, right? And these things will happen. So one thing that really bothered me, and it's kind of ironic because I'm doing music now, is that music became an idol in the church, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying like our church. I'm saying in general, with evangelical.
Yeah. Yes.
You have churches that are built around their music.
Yep.
Now.
Yep.
And they sell albums. They sell, they make money. In and of itself, not a bad thing, but now it becomes like, okay, we got to keep this up. We need another hit out there, and all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden. It's very gradually, you see in the songs too, like the theology begins to change. Because now it turns into the self-help thing, sort of, and like. I don't know. That's a very simplistic way of putting it, but
no, you're not wrong.
It begins to go off course, and I don't want to use the word traumatized. I maybe use it in more like an ironic or like a sardonic way. But it just got to the point where I'm like, I want nothing to do with church music, like modern church music whatsoever. Okay, nothing to do with it. So when we moved to BC, my dad had retired as a pastor. We moved to BC, and I went to a local church there, and I just didn't let them know that I had any, at first that that I had any skills in music, because I didn't want to be
right.
So then eventually I got, I started doing like sound for them, like basically working the soundboard in the back and things like that. But I never really got ingrained there because to me, it's like it became like a disgusting thing, and I still feel that way. I feel more that way now than I ever did before. So for me to go to a church now, and again, like I'm not going to tell people don't go to this church or whatever, like here in town. But as soon as I see photos of like a nicely set up stage with lights, I'm just like I want to stay as far away from that as possible because I'm going to go in there. I'm not going to think happy thoughts.
Yes.
I'm just not like that sort of anger is going to rise up in me, right? And you know what? Like I said, I don't want to say people shouldn't go, because some people do go and they get a lot out of it. It's like we're saying about the manosphere. Like some people still have some sort of benefit when they first get into it, whatever, right? So I don't want to say that, but it's like for me, I'm at the stage now where I'm like, I want to stay as far away from that as possible. I want to reconnect with God and the Bible on my own terms. Now, again, that can be very dangerous. So I'm not saying that people should do this en masse.
Right.
But you do need a personal connection that has not been influenced by whatever denomination you come out of, whatever and maybe even your family, right? Like if your family raised you to be a Christian, God bless them, right? They really did you a huge, huge favor, and you should thank them for it. But you will get to a point where you're like, am I just believing this because my family taught me this?
Lots of that.
Or am I believing it because it's real to me, right? And this is not the first time I go through this, but that's where I am at present. So yeah, I'm not going anywhere right now. And again, it's not ideal. You have to be among you have to be among a group of believers. That has to happen. I've been toying with the idea of maybe starting my own home group as well. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I'm still debating that sort of internally, but yeah, it's sort of unresolved for me at this point. But definitely, yeah, I'm not backsliding or anything like that. Some people might think I am. I don't really care what they think, but I know for a fact I'm not. I'm just I'm going through it like a type of leveling up process. I think it's the best way I can.
I mean, you've been through a huge readjustment in your life. Like a lot of men. I moved into this apartment, when COVID happened in America, and so I only have felt what's going on in America return to normal sometime, I would say, within the past 12 months, within the past 12 calendar months. 2022 has been brutal. It's been a brutal year. Now, for you had to flee your home country, move to an entirely new country, and not a particularly, urban part of it. Like Merida looks like a cool town from when I looked into it, but like it's not Mexico City, or it's not Toronto, right? You have to reorient your whole life. You have to leave so much behind. Praise God that it sounds like your mom and dad were able to come with you as well. But you had to uproot yourself and move away from everything that was familiar, while the entire world is melting down and trying to figure out, what am I going to do about this? How can I contribute to this? How can I protect my family? Who am I now in this new world, in this new country? Like, Nat, you're going through exactly what would happen to any man, right? That's how it seems to me. And that it sounds to me like you're able to pull your way out of it, because a lot of men would go into that and not come out, right? They would indulge. Right? But you're pulling yourself out of it. That's what it sounds like to me. Like you have something that you've put your energy and your focus and your intention to create something that is objectively good. Like, I'm not just saying that Exit Babylon was good because we're on the podcast. Like, I objectively enjoyed it and I'm excited to share it with men. And a lot of guys don't have the ability to take their anger, their frustration, their angst, their disappointment in reality, and channel it into a creative project well. Right? And so, I just want to honor you for that, because not every man would make it as far down the road as you have out of what you've just been through.
No, I really appreciate hearing that, man. Really do. It's not been easy. And like I said, I'm not done.
Sure.
I'm not out of it yet. I still have days where I slip back in, right? But I am getting better at getting back out, like, soon, like, in a much more quick way, because I'm sort of like, becoming experienced at it.
Yeah.
But it's like, and it's not something I like to talk about. But it's been definitely, it's been a real issue the last. It really started for me like 2 years ago, and this is not just because of COVID. A lot of the stuff is just like you get to a point where you realize, like, the way I am right now, I have unresolved things that I haven't dealt with my entire life. I need to introspect. I need to deal with this stuff, and it's not been an easy process. It's been over 2 years now. The last 7, 8 months have been particularly intense on that front for me. You know, I'm just holding on to onto the belief that it's for a reason. Like it's not happening to me, you know, to like break me down and defeat me, although that's a possibility if I let that happen. But because it is real, like, you know, there's real danger. But it's shaping me for what comes next, right? And that's how I view it. So I'm going through it. I'm taking the lumps, you know, just taking the lumps. And you know, like with the song "Exit Babylon" too. Like, I started writing that because I thought, like, you know, this is sort of like an allegory to me leaving Canada, right? But it's more than just that, obviously. Like it's like leaving the system, the world system, and that sort of thing. Like, you know, not being tied to it morally and spiritually and things like that. And most people be like, yeah, that's right, amen. But it's like, it's a lot harder than what it sounds like. There's a lot of temptation there. And, you know, if you admit to that sort of temptation, then, you know, you might get looked at like a weak person, or maybe like a weak Christian, a weak believer. Right. But you know what? Like, it's the same for everybody else, you know? And if you don't admit that, you can't really deal with that. So there's that part of it. But then also I started to realize, as I was working on the song, like as I was mixing the songs, it was already written, you know, and you know, like it's basically already made. I just have to mix it. And it just dawned on me, like, okay, this is like what I've been going through, you know, and you know, on the mental front too. It's like I'm leaving, or I'm in the process of leaving behind, like, you know, basically mental problems, but like, you know, that we all experience, like self-sabotage. Sure. And harsh views of yourself, which sometimes are necessary, but it can also be very debilitating. And I've been extremely harsh on myself on a mental front, like, you know, and a lot of insecurities. And like most men have like insecurities about how, you know, they, you know how they are you know, how they are perceived by women, right? I never really had that problem. Like I married my high school sweetheart, and we have a great Rich, and she's been an amazing support.
Amazing.
It's not that, but like, you know, on things like competence and like worth, like, you know, self-worth and things like that, right? And yeah, so if I don't deal with that now, I'm not going to be able to, you know, basically complete my mission, right? And it's been, like I said, it's been a 2-year process at this point. I'm still not out of it yet, but I'm understanding more, and I'm making more and more changes. These are deep changes to make, and they're very, you know, they're very upsetting. Like they upset the apple cart internally, right? And it's not a fun process, and I think for a lot of men it can be very dangerous. It can be a very dangerous process. You can lose yourself, right? So it's been interesting. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the music and putting a lot of that into the music as well.
I completely relate. I mean, you know, I think if there's any, I don't want to frame it as weakness in a bad way. We'll just say weakness because we all have them, right? Or chinks in the armor, whatever the phrase is that a man has. If the past 2 years are going to bring it out, right? If you're a spiritually, emotionally aware man, intellectually aware, you know, I've thought of it like a lot of men were deep sea diving in pressurized suits. And if you have just the slightest pinhole, right, water's going to start coming in. And if the water starts coming in, you're going to start sinking, right? And so it's really been necessary that, from my perspective, for me personally, that I find where are the weaknesses in my mind, in my heart, in my life, in my habits, right? Because there's enough gravity to pull me down to the bottom unless I start working on it. And it's been tough. Like this year, like since December of last year, have been, it's like July now, right? So it's been 8 of the hardest months of my life, right? And I just, like you, it's not just it's spiritual. Without a faith grounding, man, I don't know how I'd interpret all that. because as a test from God, that I can do. But as just capricious nature being cruel because that's what the indifferent universe is, man, I don't know that I could make it through that. And dude, guys try. I don't know why.
It's a depressing thought. I think the guys who sort of survive that in a way, because I don't see like really any benefit, but like, guys who don't kill themselves, guys who don't become like full-blown alcoholics and stuff, they will express that in ways that will not help others.
Yes.
Let's put it that way, right? Whether it's music or film or whatever, you see a lot of that today. But it is sort of helping them cope, for the meantime, kind of thing. So it is like, it's what happens, right? But it still is destructive, and maybe more so on on a societal scale.
Yeah, I mean, what would your choices be? So you find yourself in the past couple of years, you and me both, and anyone listening, find yourself under duress, mental, emotional, spiritual stress. What is your response going to be? There are three choices, right? One is to deny it, right? Many people do. That's not going to make it any better, but you could try. The other is to externalize it unproductively, to act out, right? Which is in itself kind of a form of denial. And the third is to internalize it. It's like, okay, what is this trying to teach me, right? To take it on board, to learn, to grow from it, and to frame it as a growth opportunity. And what are you going to create out of it? What are you going to do to redeem it? I mean, that is what real men do. And I don't ever like to be the guy to say like, this is what a real man, I don't like to hold that power. But I think that there is an aspect of masculinity where it's like, denial is not the answer. Making it other people's problem isn't the answer. This is your challenge. It's your problem. You work on it and make something beautiful out of it. And what more can any man be expected to do with forces that are so far beyond any of our control than that right now? Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very crucial moment in time, and people need to step up. Sure.
Do you have men around you and Marita that agree with you on that?
Yeah, you know what? So what's been really interesting too is like this whole vaccine mandate issue. It's been like a filtration process, because in Canada it's a very liberal country, and so if you live in like any given town or city in Canada, the people you meet on a day-to-day basis are probably not going to share your worldview or be nice to you even if they find out what you think. When the vaccine mandate hit, all the people that do think like you, they all made the same choice and got out. Not all of them, but a lot of them. The ones that did get out have pretty much the same worldview. There's some differences, obviously, but there's a lot more in common with these people than you would have in like any given town in Canada, right? So when these people started arriving, it's like, wow, I can like be myself and not be stressed that it's going to cause problems. Because you have that before. It's like you kind of have to censor yourself in the beginning, and when you do introduce like your more controversial views, you got to
sideways
in a more like strategic way, so it doesn't upset the apple cart too much, or you just go like all out and you just alienate yourself, right? So, but here, these people started arriving, these Canadians, and they're like, man, I can talk to these people, and they're going through a lot of the same that I'm going through, right? So we do have that, we do have that, we do have that sense of community that was lacking before in Canada, and they're all saying the same thing. And like we're playing basketball together now on Saturdays and things like that. So it's been, that part has been quite positive. And I'm just thinking like, when people start to associate together, what will it lead to? Like, we don't know yet, but it might be some really important and great things. So it's a good development.
Do you guys find that, coming together creatively now? Like, you have maybe creative people leaving? Because I know that being in the arts in any way, you better be careful about your conservative viewpoints. Like, you don't let that slip in the wrong environment. Like, you might not be invited back into that room. But where you're at now, maybe there's, sounds like there's less of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's almost none of that right now.
What sort of go ahead. What sort of careers are the men who've come down there? Where do they come from?
Oh, so this There's one guy that I'm really good friends with now. He's a mechanical engineer, and he was saying stuff like, like he went on a Zoom call, for work, and people wanted to, when the meeting first started, they went around making land claim acknowledgments.
Oh no!
So like, you know what I mean? So it's stuff like that. So a mechanical engineer is faced with this woke BS on a daily basis in Canada, right? Like they've infiltrated every level, right? So, yeah, it's just stupid stuff. And he himself is like, he's basically Indian. He was born in Africa, but he's Indian. And it's always funny because, and we always joke that he's like the most like, like he's like the biggest white supremacist I know, but he's actually like a brown Indian, right? But yeah, and a lot of immigrants actually do think that way in Canada. They don't have that same level of courage to say it, right? It's interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of these people that they're socially conservative people. Like if they come from India, or a lot of Muslims even, like they're socially conservative, right? And now they come into this country, and now they have to make land claim acknowledgments and things like that. So I'm curious to see how that's going to work out for them. We'll see. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. So yeah, mechanical engineer. A bunch of people are like retired. I don't know everybody's I don't know everybody's careers actually, but I'm trying to think now. One guy's an architect. And again, these are like highly intelligent people and highly educated people. So there's a brain drain.
Yeah.
Also people, because it's not cheap to just move, right? So they had the means to do it. So yeah, it's interesting development.
Yeah, there's a big land migration happening in the U.S. In fact, to your point about socially conservative people, I lived in San Francisco for years, and I had an Indian roommate. He was from India, from Goa, and when I was traveling, I messaged him that I was going to India. I'm like, I'm so excited to go to India. He's like, why? And I was like, I didn't understand that. Literally, that was his response. I didn't understand it until I went to India, and I understood that there are people in the world who are like they want more than what their countries have offered them. And they look to places like the United States and like Canada, and they see the opportunity to get away from the way the rest of the world runs. And so they come to our countries, and they're the ones experiencing so many terrible things. The country's like degrading around them. It's like, this is not what we moved here, and stop speaking on behalf of immigrants and minorities because, have you been to the rest of the world? You know how it is out there? Don't mess up what you've got here. Right. It's like, we're trying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you're a family man, but just curious, what's up next for Electrum Fire and the plans that you've got for the project? Yeah,
so I'm working on another song right now. I'm still writing it. Probably will be called Enemy, and it's about what we were talking about earlier, how our neighbors have been like, I've been so like indoctrinated and brainwashed that, they've been weaponized against us and they become our enemy, right? But they're not, at the same time, they're not like the real enemy, because they're also victims in a way, right? So, but it's like, yeah, it's like that. It's pretty aggressive again. And once that's done, I have songs planned that are like, it's not going to be all like aggressive and angry, It's going to be more dimensional than that. So, but yeah, that's where it is right
Some
now.
love songs, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I like love songs. Like it's, there's some really good ones, and it's necessary. Like you want to be able to like express and feel those emotions too. On part of the viewer. So there's a place for it. We'll see. If I'm inspired that way, then I have no problem doing it. I just don't know if I'm in that space right now.
Like what comes out, come out. Well, cool. Well, where can we send people to find out more about you and what you do? Maybe some of your films and your music.
Right. Yeah. So at Jon Du Toit on Twitter. So JONDUTOIT. On there, you'll find links to my website, jondutoit.com. There's links there to to my Odyssey channel, which has my shorts on it from way back, and you'll find links there to, to my music project as well, Electrum Fire, electrumfire.com. Same thing on Twitter, YouTube, whatever. If you just go to my Twitter, you'll get links there to everything.
Fantastic. I'll make sure to send a bunch of men and women your way. And thank you so much for this conversation, Jon, and for your transparency and for your honesty. And I think your struggles are probably shared by quite a lot of people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation, and I enjoyed talking to you. It went longer than I thought it would, but if it's a good convo, I don't mind, and I appreciate that. So all the best.
Thank you. I'm honored.